I want to talk today about the false expectations people have around software engineering. People watch videos and see everybody playing ping pong or going out to eat for lunch and then going out to dinner and then playing games with their coworkers in the office. But to be honest with you, that's not really the bulk of what this job is. And to be fair, the reason that I really haven't made a day in the life video is I don't really know what to do, to be honest with you. I don't really know what to make while I'm working. You know what I mean? Because I start around 8:30 to 9 o'clock, depending on the day. My first meeting is at 9:15, and that's our stand-up meeting. From there, I could have anything from design meetings, code review meetings, or just really other general like team meetings. And then probably for the second half or like half the day, I'm working on some problem like programming or doing something like that. And there's honestly not really a lot of content to show because I'm primarily like sitting, at my desk, like not really going out and about places. And honestly, there's not a lot to show. I can show in the morning when I'm like going out for a bike ride, and then maybe like if I go out like and get coffee or something in the afternoon. But honestly, that's really about it. There's nothing too exciting about, the day in the life. And I think that all those videos just sets a wrong just precedent for people coming into the job, like new grads or people looking for software engineering jobs. And yeah, there's a lot of perks. Don't get me wrong. Like there's a lot like a lot of good things that go along with it and a lot of perks, but it's not all just the perks of the office or if you're remote. And I think what happens is people get this image in their mind, especially if they are going to work in the office, that all they're going to be doing is using the amenities and using like the game room or going, and eating with their coworkers, and then, they're going to have these social outings, or they're going to use the ping pong table or like the whatever game system they happen to have in the game room, or all that stuff. But really, that is like the few and like far between experience using that stuff. Like whenever you talk to HR, they're going to make it seem like you're doing that every day. We don't even work here. Like all we do is like is fool around with like ping pong and just play games and stuff like that. But honestly, that's not really true. But that's a tactic that a lot of places use to lure people in. But then you get there and you realize, oh wait, nobody actually uses that stuff. Like there's like dust on the ping pong table, like and then there's like, the game system has like no, there's no batteries in the controllers. And I've seen that personally at a couple places I've worked at when I was in the office. I'm remote now, so this doesn't really apply. But when I was in the office, like because like 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, I watched those same videos, right? Like I saw the day in the life videos and I saw people doing all this really fun stuff and not really doing a lot of coding. But then I had, that image in my mind. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Like I'm going to hang out in the office. I'm going to have a great time. And, that became my expectation. And in reality, that was not at all the case. I think I played ping pong once. And I think I played game systems one time. We played Switch. We played Smash Brothers like one time. But I worked in the office for about a year and a half, and we didn't really do a whole lot of social things. Most of my day was spent at a desk programming. And that really should be your main expectation going into this job, is that, you have to put aside all the perks that come along with the job, right? You have to get out of your mind this utopian vision of you just playing games with your coworkers all day. You might do that once every like quarter or once every year, but you're not going to be doing that like every day. That's just not reality. And if you work in a place that is reality, then you found like the hidden gem of amongst all companies. But honestly, more of what reality is people sit at their desks, do their work, eat lunch at their desks, and then leave about 3:30 to take care of personal stuff or pick up their kids from school. and then they go and continue their day at home. That's like the vast majority of what I saw. And if that's not the case, then you might be at a place that stays super late, and then everyone gets dinner because you're there till 7 o'clock, right? Like, so it kind of depends what environment you're in, but you're not doing anything. And hopefully that's not people's expectation going into the job, because on one hand, you can do the bare minimum, right? And then play all these games and goof around all you want, but you're not going to see the level of advancement that you would compared to other people who do sit at their desks and do their work and really stay on top of projects. And like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, you have to have fun sometimes too. Like, I'm not saying not to do that, but I'm saying that shouldn't be your primary, like, that shouldn't be the primary expectation going into the job. But I think that when you're talking, when you're interviewing with these companies, a lot of times, at least from my experience, they always brought up like all the perks and all the amenities at the office. Like, that was the main thing that I was looking for in a job. It's like, that couldn't be that couldn't be the farthest thing. Like, that's like the farthest thing I'm looking for in an actual job. What I'm looking for in a job is my quality of life when I'm actually doing my job, like when I'm actually programming and doing software engineering. The couple things that you absolutely have to ask, don't ask about the ping pong tables. Don't ask about, what game system do they have in the break room. Don't ask about the free snacks. While that might be nice that they have, nuts or like donuts or something in the snack room, don't ask about that. You have to ask about the deployment schedule. Okay, you have to know when you're going to be doing code deploys. Is it going to be during the day? Is it at night? Is it automated? Is it manual? You have to know that. How do you handle rollbacks? Do you handle rollbacks as a team? Is it going to be after hours? Is it going to be during the night? When is it going to be? Is there an on-call schedule? Some companies, they don't tell you this, but some companies have an on-call schedule that everybody gets volunteered for or signed up for. Sometimes I've seen it in the job description, like there's a rotating on-call schedule. Sometimes I haven't seen it, but there is one. So you have to ask if there's an on-call schedule, because if you find out that you're going to be on call for a week out of every month, that might sway you away from the job itself. You have to then ask if there's travel. Is there travel associated with the job? Okay, do you have to travel once a week every quarter? Like, that might be a breaking, thing for you. You also have to ask about what the start and end times are. Is it flexible? Can you start at 8 and stop at 4? Can you start at 7 and stop at 3:30? How does that work? Or is it, do you have to start at 9 to 5? Because that might be a breaking thing for you. And you absolutely must find out if there is any, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. You have to ask if there is what the support structure around the applications are. Who's actually talking to whoever has the issue? Is there a team of support engineers that the work goes through first and then goes to the dev team? Or does it go right to the dev team and you're going to be on the phone taking calls and talking to people about the problems? Because some companies, that's their structure, and you have to be okay with that. But sometimes they don't tell you that up front. You have to ask about what that is. You also have to ask about when the last layoffs were. Sometimes they just had a round of layoffs and then they're refilling the teams that were just laid off. You got to figure out why the layoffs happened. And depending on the reason, might sway you one way or the other from the company. But above all, those are like a lot of the questions to ask. But I think the biggest expectation setting question is, honestly, what in the world is the on-call schedule? Okay, you have to find that out. Sometimes there's not one, but sometimes there is. And if there is, that might move you away from the job, and you have to be okay with, your phone ringing in the middle of the night. And that's a big source of burnout for a lot of developers, and you just have to find that out. But that's a big expectation that people don't have because they don't know, and they don't ask the question when they go into the interview. But HR, when they talk to you, they're not going to bring that up most of the time. They're going to bring up things like the perks, the amenities of the office, what your salary expectations are. And you're going to ask all these questions. Sometimes they'll say they'll have to ask somebody and then get back to you. But if they say that, make sure that you follow up with an email in writing all these questions, because you got to get this stuff in writing as much as you can. because this is just looking out for you, right? You're trying to find a good fit for yourself. You're trying to you're trying to find a job that fits what what you're trying to go for, right? What you're looking for. Maybe it's not a right fit. Maybe the things that you have to do as part of the job requirements don't really line up with where you're trying to go in your own career. And for me, one thing that happened to me one time when I was interviewing is that I found out there was a lot of travel associated with the job. And sometimes when you see listings, you can see like a percentage given sometimes on the job posting. Like I know LinkedIn has that sometimes, and also Indeed, it'll say like 0 to 25% travel required. Well, it starts at 0. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's probably no travel, right? It's probably not the 25%. Well, in this case, it ended up being the 25% at minimum. I could have been traveling once for a week every couple months, and I didn't know. There was no schedule. The job was good, but that was a deal breaker for me. So I actually stopped the interview process because of my hesitations around the travel, because it was travel all across the country, and that was just not something that I was open to doing at the time. But that's something you absolutely have to ask about, because if you get to that last round of interviews and you start talking salary expectations and you start, talking about a number that you can settle on, but then that gets brought up, you might not be in the right frame of mind to process that information had you had asked about it in the first interview with, HR or the hiring manager or whoever it is. You have to ask about that, write it down, write these questions out ahead of time, because you don't want to sound like you're like desperate for this, whatever they ask, you'll do, right? You have to find a good fit for yourself. And for me, that traveling once a week every couple months was absolutely not going to fly, right? I didn't want to do that at all. And I let them know, and they were perfectly fine with that, because I let them know. I said, hey, I don't think that I'm going to be able to continue this process because of this doesn't really fit what I'm looking for, but, thank you for taking the time to interview me. So just be respectful and be honest about what you're thinking and what you're feeling, because all this stuff sometimes can be negotiable, right? Sometimes jobs have it on there that they're remote, right? But they're only remote after the first few months. I've seen a job this way. It started out as a hybrid position that you had to go in for a couple days a week and then work from home the remaining days. But then after the 3 or 4 months, I guess it was like some kind of vetting, period to make sure that you're actually working, then you could work remotely full time. But the problem is that the company was like an hour and a half away from where I lived. And obviously I can't commute that every day. So I tried to, I brought that up as something to, talk about and discuss, like say, hey, is it possible that I could be remote for the first part and then maybe only come in once or twice during this process? Ultimately, unfortunately, it didn't end up working out, but it was something that I just put on the table as something that I saw and wanted to talk about. So you have to just get everything on the table and make sure that you're all on the same page as to where you're at. If you have any hesitations at all about anything that you saw in the job posting, you have to ask. And these are the kind of expectations that you have to come in with, right? You should assume that there's going to be something on that job posting that you're not going to agree with, or that probably doesn't line up with what you're looking for. You have to assume that there probably is going to be some form of on-call schedule. You have to assume that you might have to do a nightly deployment at once in a while. And you have to assume that you'll probably have to take a support call or two. Those things are probably, you can assume a lot of those, you probably will have to do those at some point in time, but just talk about them, right? Talk about what that might actually look like. If you don't talk about it, you'll never know, and you might go into it with the wrong set of expectations. So that's at least from what I've seen and just experienced in my own, journey. It might be different for you, and you might have different red flags that maybe catch your eye that you ask about or talk about on an interview. Obviously, expectations too get a little gray in terms of salary. I think it's a positive and a negative that it's like we can look up salaries for the most part for any job around the country, and then you can run filters on like, okay, years experience. You can find, you know, a bunch of salary sharing threads that people will share their salaries. I find those to be really valuable actually, because I find those to be a little more realistic than like the Glassdoor type salary range, because that can be pretty wide, and that can be pretty like skewed based on an anonymous review that was put in. But for the most part, I think they're okay. I really do. And I think that if you couple those with salary sharing threads on like Reddit or other like forums, I think you can get a solid number. I really do. But I think that the issue is that a lot of content out there is circulated around big tech with just the ridiculous salaries. You have to go in with the expectation that those salaries really are just, those are like the minority in the context of salaries, right? If you're in like Nebraska, you know, it might be a tough sell to get a Google salary, right, that they pay in California. It just isn't gonna, it might not work out like that. So it can be hard, you know, because it happened to me, right? Like I looked at, when I started out, I saw all these super high salaries, people saying, oh, I got an offer for 180 out of college with no experience. I'm like, oh, well, you know, maybe that's what I should get. You know, obviously that's not going to be the case, right? But you can certainly work up to that. But just have that expectation that, okay, you know, just be realistic. Try to figure out what are realistic numbers for the area that you live in and for the industry that you're working in, and just try to get a realistic feel. Okay, like this, it's super easy to see those super high numbers, get real excited, and then your hopes get let down when you actually get an offer and it's like way under from where you want to. Now, obviously, salary is negotiable. It's expected that you negotiate. And it's easier said than done, right? Some places are weird about salary negotiations. You kind of have to play the game, unfortunately, just, you know, timing when you ask about salary expectations, giving a range when they ask you what your expectation is, and just different things like that. I wish it wasn't like that, but that's just kind of how it is. There's this shroud of secrecy around salaries, unfortunately. I don't think there should be, but it is how it is, so you just have to figure out that part. But again, just try to, you know, have your expectations, you know, realistic as much as you can. But all that to say, hopefully you enter into this job with an optimistic outlook, but a realistic outlook. You know, you're not going to be goofing off, eating food and doing nothing and playing ping pong. There's always ping pong. You're going to be doing something, right? You're going to be working. You're going to be building something. You're going to be interacting with people. You're going to be on meetings, on calls, debugging, doing a lot of those things. So hopefully this is helpful. It's hard for me to always see people have false expectations going into this job, because I know I did, and I hope that can change. Anyway, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.